Welcome to Podcast Sound Advice, the place for up-to-date podcast tactics and trends. You'll find actionable strategies to help you grow your audience, expand your influence, and monetize your content. Join Phyllis and Kelvin for Podcast Sound Advice starting now.
Hi, welcome to the Sound Advice Podcast. This is Phyllis, and joining me today, Kelvin's here with me.
Hey, how you doing?
And joining us is one of our clients and a good friend, Sandra Scaiano. Let me tell you, hey, Sandra, thanks for coming in.
Hey, thanks for having me, guys.
I'm so happy to be here. We've tried to set this up for a little bit, so it's great that we were able to do it today. Let me just tell everybody a little bit about you for the people that don't know you yet. Sandra is a wife, a mom, and a business owner. And before she set up shop for herself, she had a life in corporate PR and marketing for 20 plus years, where she created strategies and brands in fashion, finance, consumer products, and more. She has a couple of great episodes where she talks about that, actually, which is very cool. Sandra takes the same big picture approach with her current clients. And one of the things that's great about Sandra, you have a unique ability, Sandra, to see sort of the big picture from the marketing and messaging perspective. And Sandra also has the tech skills to make those big picture visions come to life and websites and memberships and so forth. Being able to do both of those things as well as you do, which is really, really well, it's one of the reasons that your clients see such great results and why people love working with you. Now, she started her podcast, and it's called The Long Game, and we'll let you explain a little bit about that title here in a second, but it suits her perfectly. She just celebrated her 1-year publishing anniversary in May. Yay, Sandra, for hitting that 1-year mark, and she's still going strong, obviously. She just released episode 66, and when this interview goes live, she'll probably be around 68 or 69, and still moving, which is great. We love working with you, Sandra. We have a lot to talk about. So let's start really quick. First thing, let's talk about why you decided to podcast and why did you decide to go with The Long Game?
Hi, thank you for having me again. It's great to be here. Podcasting for me, I had been in my business for a long time at that point. It was over 10 years. And, I wanted some way to express myself. And it wasn't at that point just social media. I wasn't ready for the video piece. There's a lot of moving parts in my business and a lot of time, and I wasn't ready for that. And I love speaking. I'm a natural, I will talk with you. And I was like, this is it for me. I'm really going to try this. And for me, it's like, once you have that idea, I went from 0 to 60. It was a matter of 2 or 3 months. And my podcast was launched and live once I knew, I brainstormed the ideas and, made that happen. And The Long Game came about because that's really my philosophy on business. You got to show up, you got to do the work. I work with a lot of clients who, there's different voices and people are like, try this, do that. And it's the quick way. And there are no quick fixes for long-term success. Every time someone has, quote, I'm doing air quotes, made it, they have been doing this for 15 years.
Right.
And, it seems like an overnight success.
Right.
And there are some hits, viral hits and things like that happen with social media, but it takes time. And I work with my clients under the guise of that notion that, we aren't quick fixing it. We are building foundations in your business that you're going to build upon. So I'm really about getting the foundation right. And then you're going to build, because that's going to allow you to scale and not have to go back and fix them.
Right. Perfect. Yeah. And you help people really start at that point, right? With that whole scale and growth in mind. Yeah, which is one of the...
Yeah, my clients come to me at different points. I work with mostly female entrepreneurs. I say female entrepreneurs and a couple of cool guys.
Nice.
And they're at different stages. Some people are, already established in their business, but they haven't really moved online yet. So we help to transition them online. What I do really helps to imagine their next phase of business. And I also have a lot of people who are on their second act. They are leaving their corporate world experience and they are, ready to do that next piece, that passion play for themselves. But, there's a lot that goes into business building and they don't know all those ropes, even though they may have been a, vice president X,
Right.
Y, and Z in their business. Like all of this other stuff in digital businesses and online is really new to them. And so I work with a lot of people on that transition and to get them going.
Yeah, that's great. I agree. Now, I'm curious though, as you jumped into this and you kind of had the idea and the inspiration, and then you took quick action and got rolling. What has surprised you about podcasting?
Well, I mean, it's really, it is that commitment. You've got to make a commitment. I mean, it's like everything else. It looks so glamorous and glossy and you're consuming other people's stuff. And not that it was so much of a surprise, but like when you're in it, I mean, there are times where you've got to like force yourself to do it. And then there's times where you're really, on a roll and it's flowing and you're like, oh, I got 4 episodes and, I'm stacked. And then I'm like, oh my gosh, I've got to get this done. And I'm working up against a deadline. But it really is that consistency piece, I think, until you really are in creating consistent content,
Mhm.
that is another level that you go to, and I realize like sometimes I'm in it as well. And I'm like, I don't know if I said what I wanted to say. And then I go back and listen like a little while later and I'm like, that was good. I liked that. That actually was okay.
Yeah, good. Yeah, I think a lot of people can relate to what you said. No matter what kind of consistent content you're creating, right? There's a little bit of that process piece to it, right? That you have to just get comfortable with into your workflow, whatever that is for you.
And I will have to, I do want to say that like, I did set this up at a time in my business and in a way so that I could do it consistently. I do have, I work with my time is really kept with clients. So I have your team who edits, my VA who helps and sets things up. Like I would not have been able to take it on without building a team to help me do that at this juncture because, it is a lot to get those ideas out. I mean, you really don't realize if you're doing a solo episode for a half an hour, let's say, like that's a lot of writing. That's a lot of thoughts. Like you will be surprised how quick you can run through one page of a Word doc, right? And
Right.
when you're speaking it.
Right.
So I really, I work on my content. And that was kind of my goal with this
Yeah.
is to be able to have this as an outlet for myself and to express myself and then to have a team help me to have it come to life.
So the hardest thing about it would be creating content that you can put together from week to week to week to week. You would say that's the
It is
hardest
tough. I
thing?
mean, you have to have a vision, right? You've got to have a vision for what you want to say. You have to have a vision for why you're doing it.
And how often you're going to say it. You know what I
Right,
mean? If you're going to
exactly.
say it every week, that's hours of work you have to put in every week to put that together. So totally get that.
Totally. And I think too, it's like, for me, it was, who do I want to showcase as well? Like, so I do solo episodes
Right.
and then also interviews. So it's a
Right.
mix. I'm about 70-30, 70% solo episodes, 30% interviews. And that's been really fun as well to expand on my own viewpoint with other people and bring that in. And I think, you do have to have an opinion, a viewpoint on to have a podcast, and to make it interesting and have an audience that you develop from it.
Yeah, agree. I think some of the best podcasts, and yours is certainly in that category, you do have to have a point of view. And I know you know this from your marketing days, right? Like when you have a point of view and you share it the way that you do, very unapologetically, and again, you're not controversial by any means, but there is going to be maybe, a small percentage of people are going to be like, yeah, that's not my vibe. And that's okay, right? I know you tell your clients that too, right?
Yeah, and I think it's also like, how do you want to approach things? So here's a perfect for instance that, during right after I launched, so I launched during COVID.
Yeah.
So I was going to launch in March and then I ended up having to push back because I had some episodes recorded and I was like, that's kind of tone deaf to not mention what is happening, this global pandemic in the
Right.
world, to at least like change it a little bit
Right.
and push back. Or we were all kind of seeing like, what's happening in the world, right? We've
Yeah.
never experienced that. So I pushed it back a little bit. And then all of the Black Lives Matter items happened as well. And that's really important to me. But there was so much content out there at that time and how people were soaking in that content. I was listening to other people as well. And I felt like, there were a lot of the same books being recommended. And that's all great. But I was like, I didn't read any of those books, so I don't want to recommend those books that everyone else is recommending. And I was like, what's my take on it? Like I
Yeah.
really thought about it. And I did a whole piece on the art that was inspired by the Black Lives Movement, the posters, the different artists that were coming up and creating art. And that, like, I just got goosebumps saying that to you because that inspires me. Like, I love art. And like, that was my way to highlight my viewpoint of Black Lives Matter and bring people to the forefront, Black artists and different modes of work. And that is one point for me about all of this in having a viewpoint. It's like, you don't have to say the same thing. And I feel like, it gave me something to kind of be like, oh, I want to go back and revisit that, or I was able to link, if I'm able to turn people on to following these artists, like, that's great. That's helping get the message out. So it's those kind of pieces. Like, how do you want to even come to these world events that we're having? What do you want to say about it?
Well, yeah, because they all impacts us. I like your episode. You've done a couple of episodes actually about art and artists, and they're all really good. I certainly personally enjoy them because some of it is new to me. Some of the artists that you've talked about are new to me, so I'm kind of getting connected with some new people and some stuff that I can check out, which is also great. Now, one of the other things that kind of hit the radar last year that I know you jumped into a little bit was Clubhouse. I know you did an episode about this as well, and you and I have talked about this offline. Obviously, it's also audio content. So I'm curious how you feel about that and what your experience has been.
First of all, for those people who don't know, what is Clubhouse?
Clubhouse is an all audio platform. It launched last year, but it launched in 2020, and then it was invite only and only for iOS devices, Apple devices. So there was this exclusivity, and it really started in the music industry. So there was like a big music industry conversation kind of happening there. And then it started opening up and people were getting invites and sharing them. And I would say around like October, November type of thing, it kind of opened up into this other entrepreneurial marketing world. And there we were all talking about it and hopping on. I loved it. I got caught up in it, in the beginning. I was like, ooh, over Christmas break, I was like, everybody, mine is off. I'm just listening with the headphones in. Like,
that's so great.
What, you're talking to me? I've got my AirPods in. I couldn't get off of it. So that was cool. And it was interesting because like, as a marketer, I was like, wow, I realized when I put up a post on Facebook that said something like, oh my gosh, I'm loving this. Everybody was like, what is that? Or tell me more. How do you get, explaining. So I was like, all right, let me take some early learnings and put it into an episode. Just also as a finger on the pulse, like, there were people who were calling me to be like, I want to have that as part of, what should I be doing to have that as part of my marketing plan type of thing. That was really fun to kind of do an episode about that. And, it goes to show too, like, keywords, like that was a very popular episode for me because it was, I forget the exact title, but it was like, how to market yourself on Clubhouse or, type of thing.
Right.
And people were looking for that key. They were searching that term. And so the episode came up and a lot of people downloaded it and were introduced to me through that episode.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Are you still active in Clubhouse? Tell me how things are
But
going.
I was going to say, but I don't really spend a lot of time on it anymore because, well, actually, it's funny because I did do recently a follow-up a little bit about Clubhouse. I hop on every now and then. Like, it's interesting. I think it could be a really successful part. They allow recording now, so you're able to record, but it's a live interaction type of piece. One person is presenting or multiple people are presenting, and then you're listening to get out of that conversation. So I was like, I don't have the time to be spending hours a day on Clubhouse at this point. But I did revisit because they, as a organization, have really done some interesting marketing partnerships. So just recently, I talked about how they did a partnership with the NFL and the NHL. Now it's interesting because Twitter with their audio component,
right,
they are doing almost the same type of partnership that Clubhouse did with, some of these organizations like the NFL and stuff like that. So that is really interesting because I brought that up again to kind of say, like, as smaller businesses, we can't make those partnerships necessarily with the NFL, but like, what can we learn from it? Like
Right.
they did some really cool things because it was all audio. They brought on, the coaches and the players, and they also brought, like, what I thought was cool that we could learn from was like some of these ancillary people who could be in the conversation. They're privy to the back end, they're on the field or this and that,
Right.
and they really have a lot to add to the conversation. So, in our world, we don't have to get the guru, we can get the person who works with the guru and their viewpoint of the business because they're really involved in it. So it was just interesting. You can still learn from what these big guys are doing, and it's kind of kept me into Clubhouse a little bit.
Yeah. So thanks.
I had no idea. So
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they did a whole thing with like the NHL, and it's
I'm
pretty
a PC
cool what
guy,
they worked
part
out.
of the reason, and I don't have an iPhone that may have something to do with it too. But
It just opened up to Android this week, or just past couple weeks.
Very recently. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I'm with you there. A lot of people have reached out, or not, I wouldn't say a lot, but several people have asked us or asked me, because it's audio content and they know we, obviously we do a lot with audio content, what we think about it. And like you, I think there's probably some really cool, interesting things that you can do. And I can see it being a cool place to show up, maybe to support other work, right? So like if you have a book coming out and maybe you want to show up at Clubhouse so that people really can make a connection with you as an author, or maybe, again, special launches and things like that. Those are things that come to my mind right away. I'm sure there's a ton of other things, but you introduced Clubhouse to me and I appreciated it and I found it interesting. And definitely something to keep an eye on, and just kind of pay attention to what's happening there and the kind of content that's being created. I think it is really good for people if you don't have right now the ability to maybe launch your own podcast or some other things. It definitely is a good place to show up and just make some connections and just really understand, like, what are people in your industry talking about? What kinds of topics seem to be really popular? If nothing else, it's going to really help you just with that kind of stuff. It's a really good place to really just listen in, I think.
Totally. And the ability to raise your hand and enter the conversation is cool because, some of them are just too stacked. There are some rooms, there's 1,000 people in it. Like, it's tough, but you can go into smaller rooms and actually make a connection in that way. And so I think that's cool, in terms of its longevity piece. And now that, you're able to record rooms, people are able to repurpose that and use it in different ways. I just saw too that the app Headliner just came out with like they were just emailing this week about like repurpose your Clubhouse recordings into audiograms and use it to promote on social, but like, so it's now becoming part of that,
Yeah. And that's new. That's really new. So
very,
I haven't seen
you guys
a lot
are hearing it here first.
That's right.
Let me ask you this. If someone were thinking about getting into podcasting, what's some advice that you would give them?
I would say to people, well, number one, again, we talked about it, have a viewpoint. Like, what do you want to say? What do you want to talk about? And you can let that evolve. I mean, you can start. I'm a big fan of marketing is malleable. Just like I always tell my clients, your website is malleable. Get it up and going.
Your podcast is malleable too, and it can adjust and change and grow with you. Absolutely.
Exactly. So it's, you don't have to be steadfast on talking about the same thing for 5 years if, you can get started, but you do have to know what you want to talk about and be able to map that out and also be able to make the commitment. Like you were saying, you've got to choose, is it a week? Is it bi-weekly? Is it a monthly type of thing? Because you do want to have that consistency in it as well. And I will say that take the self-judgment away, like, all right, we all know our voice. And I actually did an episode with a voice, one of my clients who is a voice coach. People hate their voices, right? And so we did a whole episode on that.
It's a great episode.
But like, let that go, it's the same thing if you were doing video, like, oh, I don't like the way I look. Like, just let it go and get started.
Yeah, I recommend people to test, but not test to the point where you don't get started. You're not going to be perfect in the beginning. You know what I mean? Get those recordings down. Get them on, I would say tape, but that really dates me.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. I know what you mean.
So anyway, get it on digital somehow and, get started.
And you don't need the biggest investment of everything. It is a
No.
light investment. And, for me, it really I started, like I said, at COVID. My whole family was home. I have 2 kids and a husband that were all here. And I would lock myself in the bedroom, and I have a little foam stand around my microphone. And I just started recording. And it's funny because people would say, like, why aren't you recording video at the same time? And I was like, listen, I am not mad at that. I am happy with audio. There's a lot of things I can do with this. And if I had to do video, I wouldn't have done it. I would not have had 66 episodes if they were being recorded on video, because I was showing up in my corner of my bedroom recording because my whole family was here and I was yelling at them to shut up the whole time. Like I was,
Yeah.
and I was like, so it really enabled me to move forward because it was a different medium and because of the medium. And I'm a big fan of, like, in my own personal life as well. Like, I have been an early adopter of podcast listening for a long time. So it was something I was very familiar with. And, I have a dog that I walk like once or twice a day, and I'm in on audiobooks and podcasts and all of that. So I'm really able to absorb content that way. So for me, it was kind of like, hey, I'm out there too now, on my own type of thing.
Awesome. That's very helpful. So moving on to your podcast, let's talk about that for a little bit. For people who don't know you yet or haven't listened to your podcast yet, they should definitely check it out. So can you give us what couple of episodes that you'd like to direct people to listen to that will help them get a sense of who you are and some great info at the same time?
Sure. So you can find the podcast at thelonggamepodcast.net. And that'll bring you to my website where you can, the audio is there, but you can also listen. Of course, it's on every device. It's on every platform.
That's right.
Go find it. So there are a couple. So, I work a lot with course creators and membership site creators. So, one of my favorite episodes is episode 36. And I think it gives a really good sense of who I am and what I'm talking about. So if you're a course creator or you want to become one, that episode is called The Trifecta: Onboarding, Automations, and Segmenting. And it is filled with insight about taking your course from good to great. And, courses and memberships are really about experiences for both the student and the course creator. And we often times leave ourselves out of that equation. So, using these tactics and understanding how onboarding and automation and segmenting, like, they can really help you and help the experience of your course on both ends. If students aren't finding things, like, onboarding helps with that. How are you going to manage your whole business? Automations help you with that. And segmenting is really about relationships. How can you have specific conversations with your audience? So really understanding that is key. And I talk about it in this episode from a course perspective, but these are really valuable universal concepts for online business as a whole. I mean, you can use onboarding and automation and segmenting whether you have a course or not.
Yeah.
So that is one episode to check out. And it's actually part of a series of course. If you want to have a course or membership, there's a number before and after of that. And then one of my favorite episodes is the episode I did last week, episode 66. The long game is happiness. It's a short and sweet mini episode that I did this summer, and it's really to the point. I reference Robert Mack, who studies the relationship between happiness and success. And we often think that happiness is followed by success. I'll be happy when, right? I reach that goal.
Yep.
But Mack suggests that happiness is the ingredient to success. Happiness leads to success. So, do you love what I do? It starts there, right? And I just feel like finding a way to be happy now is how you will become successful. So I love that premise of happy first, because, no matter what, you're left with happy. So I guess I've gotten better. I mean, I whipped that one out.
Well, I love it too. It was both of those episodes are good. I've heard them both. I enjoyed them both. And we will link to both of these in our show notes as well at thesoundadvicestrategies.com/podcast. Find Sandra's podcast, and all this will be there. I am going to, Sandra, go ahead and link to the episode about with the voice coach, the voice expert.
Kelly Burge. Yep.
Because we hear that a lot, right, from our clients or potential clients that they don't like how they sound. So she has a lot of great information, and it's a fabulous episode as well. So before we leave, go ahead and give us the website again to find your podcast. And also, I know that you're active on Pinterest and Instagram, so tell people how to find you there as well.
Sure. TheLongGamePodcast.net is where you can find my podcast episodes and links to all of the major listening platforms. On Pinterest, which I really has been great. I really have been using Pinterest in promotion of my podcast. And I am at Sandra Scaiano there, Scaiano. And on Instagram, I'm at Sandra Sky, Scai. And, by the time this is out, I've made the other good thing about having a podcast, I'll end with this thought, is my next step is to repurpose that podcast and start with video and start more on social with it. So I'll really be taking the back stock of what I've created in these past 66 and plus episodes and start repurposing it now and taking myself to that next step. So, if you join me on Instagram, I'm also Sandra Scaiano on Facebook. You'll be able to see, video as well as audio of what's going on.
Awesome.
Yeah. Well, people, as you can tell, Sandra has great energy and lots of enthusiasm. Her podcast, listening to her podcast is very much the same. It's awesome. One of the things I love about Sandra, there's plenty, but she's the bubbly, effervescent, person that you think she is. She comes across that way in her podcast, and that's exactly who she is, which is fantastic. So thank you for joining us.
Yes.
Kelvin, do you have anything else?
I do not, but thank you very much. You're a great guest.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. Thank you guys for having me. And you guys, if you're thinking about doing a podcast, you don't have to do it alone. I mean, you've got a team right here and you can really help to execute your ideas. So, my love goes right back to you guys.
Oh, well, thanks so much.
Thank you.
That's our wrap for this episode. We hope you found today's sound advice helpful. Let us know what you think by leaving us a review. You can get more resources at podcastsoundadvice.com. Until next time.
This podcast is part of the Sound Advice FM network. Sound Advice FM. Women's voices amplified.